1 minute ago. Alaska's coastline is lighting up with alerts right now. This is not a drill. A powerful offshore earthquake hits so hard that the ocean itself seems to lurch, and in the same breath, tsunami fears spike along the coast. Sirens begin to scream. Phones vibrate non-stop. People stop mid-step, mid-sentence, mid-drive, because something is happening beneath that black water that no one can see. Scientists are terrified by the first incoming readings, because the numbers arrive fast, and they do not look normal. Cameras shake, streetlights sway, and out past the harbors, the sea surface looks wrong, like it is inhaling. The first reports pour in like a flood. Offshore, hard hit, strong enough to rattle the coast even from miles out in the Gulf. In the immediate seconds after the rupture, nothing looks broken yet. No collapsed skyline, no flaming headline image, just that sickening rolling motion underfoot, that sudden animal instinct in the chest telling everyone the same thing at once: move. Along the Alaska coast, people step outside into cold air and stare at the horizon like the horizon has turned into a threat. In fishing towns, in port communities, in scattered neighborhoods where the land meets the water, doors fling open. Boots hit porches, someone yells for their kids, someone else grabs a jacket with one hand and a phone with the other. The shaking is already fading, but the fear is getting louder, because offshore earthquakes don't just end. Offshore earthquakes send messages, and the message the ocean can send is a wall. On the roads near the shoreline, traffic changes instantly. This isn't normal commuting anymore. This is evacuation behavior. Drivers don't need instructions to start climbing away from the water. The moment the words "tsunami fears spike" start appearing on screens, the coast becomes a countdown. People who know this place, who know what the sea can do when it's pushed, don't wait for certainty. They've seen enough footage in their lives to recognize the pattern. Quake offshore, confusion on land, and then the race begins. Because the wave, if it comes, doesn't care if you're ready. Inside local emergency rooms and dispatch centers, the tone changes. Radios crackle. Operators speak faster, more clipped. The earthquake itself becomes the first problem, but the tsunami threat becomes the second problem, and the second problem feels worse, because it's invisible and it moves with purpose. Officials begin to speak in urgent fragments. They don't have full answers yet. They don't have full models. What they have is the first hard fact. A powerful quake hits offshore Alaska, and that alone is enough to trigger a chain of dread up and down the coast. In offices where screens glow with maps, analysts watch for the same signs: sudden sea level shifts, sensor spikes, any hint that the ocean floor has jumped in the wrong direction. They wait for confirmation, but the waiting is the torture. They know how quickly a coast can go from fine to gone. And on the ground, people feel that waiting in their bones. Along harbors, boats bump against docks like nervous animals. The water slaps against pilings in a rhythm that feels off. In some places, the sea seems to pull back just a little, and that tiny movement, barely noticeable, becomes a dagger to the imagination. Because everyone has heard the warning: if the water retreats, run. Even if no one wants to be the one who panics too early, nobody wants to be the one who panics too late. Then the alerts tighten. Not just earthquake, not just offshore, now it's tsunami fears spike. That phrase hits like a second quake, because it changes the story from shaking ground to moving ocean, from momentary violence to arriving violence. And now Alaska's coast feels like a stage where the next act could begin at any second. On the edges of towns, people start moving uphill. Some grab emergency bags, some grab nothing but their children. Some hesitate, because the mind tries to bargain with danger. It tries to slow it down, it tries to make it smaller, but the phone keeps buzzing. The first chaotic videos start circulating. Shaky footage of people running, cars turning around, a camera pointed at the sea like the sea is about to confess something. Voices in those clips are high and thin with adrenaline. You hear it in the way they breathe. You hear it in the way they say the same thing over and over, not as repetition, but as disbelief. It hit offshore. Did you feel that? They're saying tsunami. In the minutes immediately following the quake, the coastline becomes a line of tension. Every bay, every inlet, every low-lying street near the water becomes a possible impact zone. And Alaska is not one simple coastline. Alaska is a jagged, complex edge. A vast stretch of communities separated by distance, by wilderness, by water itself. That makes the fear spread unevenly. In one town, people hear sirens. In another, they hear nothing but wind and the distant creak of docks. In one place, the alert comes through instantly. In another, someone hears about it from a friend before the official message arrives, and that delay becomes its own panic. Because when information arrives late, rumor arrives early. And rumor, right now, is gasoline. Emergency agencies begin to push out statements with careful, urgent words. They don't want to cause stampedes. They don't want people driving into ditches in the dark. But they also cannot soften it too much because if the wave is real, the time window is brutal. They use the language of action. Move to higher ground. Stay away from the shore. Do not go to the beach to watch. And that last one matters because the human instinct to witness disaster is strong, especially when the sea looks calm, especially when the sky looks ordinary, especially when the mind wants proof. But this kind of threat doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives like a betrayal. Scientists and monitoring centers stare at streams of incoming data that look like the Earth is still ringing from the impact. The quake is not just a single punch, it's a violent slip deep beneath the ocean, an event that can change pressure, reshape seafloor contours, and shove water in ways that don't show up on a casual glance. They look for the spike, the telltale bulge, the sudden unnatural pulse that screams, the ocean has been displaced. And as they wait, the coastal population begins doing what humans always do in sudden danger. They form tiny plans, and those plans collide. Some families jump in cars, others head out on foot, some try to grab pets, some can't find keys, someone's grandmother refuses to leave, someone's kid is asleep and doesn't understand why they're being lifted like luggage into a night that suddenly feels hostile. In a coastal apartment, a father checks his phone, then checks it again, then again, like pressing refresh can change physics. He looks out the window and sees neighbors moving, and that sight becomes the final push. He doesn't need a siren now. He needs altitude. In a small shop near the water, a worker freezes with a box in their hands, listening to distant shouting. The register is still open. The door is still unlocked. And then the alert comes through. Short, sharp, official. The worker drops the box and runs. Behind that run is a thought so clear it feels like a commandment. The ocean is coming, even if it doesn't, even if it might, because might is enough when the cost of being wrong is death. The signs were there. This is what people say later, after disasters, when they try to stitch meaning into chaos. But right now, in the live moment, the signs are not a neat timeline. They are scattered, confusing, and terrifying. The quake hits offshore. People feel it. Some describe it as a rolling motion, like the ground becomes water. Others describe it as a sudden jolt, like the world snaps sideways. Objects fall, pictures tilt, a few windows crack, dogs bark and won't stop. Birds lift off in frantic bursts. Then, silence. Not the calm silence of safety, the heavy silence of waiting. And into that silence, the coastal imagination pours the worst possible image. A wave racing across dark water, invisible until it's too late. Authorities react in layers. The first layer is automated. Sensor triggers, alert systems waking up, protocols turning. The second layer is human, scientists conferring, emergency managers coordinating, dispatchers fielding calls from people who don't even know what question to ask. Is it coming? How long do we have? Do I leave now? Where do I go? But nobody wants to say the wrong thing on record. Because this is breaking news danger, and every sentence can change behavior. If they underplay it and a wave arrives, lives are lost. If they overplay it and the wave doesn't arrive, trust collapses, and the next alert might be ignored. So officials choose the only safe posture in a moment like this. Assume the worst until proven otherwise. That decision spreads through communities like electricity. You can feel it in the sudden movement of crowds. You can feel it in the way traffic patterns flip. You can feel it in the emptiness that starts to appear along certain low coastal roads as people abandon them for higher routes. But Alaska is not easy terrain. Higher ground is not always a straight drive up a hill. Sometimes it's a winding road, sometimes it's a trail, sometimes it's a limited number of routes that suddenly become choke points. And when choke points appear, panic begins to stack. A driver hits a bend and sees brake lights glowing red in the cold. Cars crawl. People lean forward over steering wheels, trying to see what's ahead. Someone honks. Someone gets out, shouting directions that nobody can hear. In the confusion, one car pulls to the side and stalls. Another tries to pass and nearly clips it. Tires kick gravel. A child cries. A dog barks from the back seat. And above it all, the constant buzzing of phones. Alerts, messages, calls, the digital heartbeat of fear. Meanwhile, along the waterline, the danger remains unseen. The sea doesn't have to roar to be lethal. Tsunamis often arrive not as a single towering wave, but as a series of surges, violent currents, sudden rises that turn harbors into washing machines. The first thing they destroy is not buildings. The first thing they destroy is stability. Boats snap lines. Docks break apart. People standing too close are pulled off their feet. Vehicles near the shore get picked up and rolled like toys, and the water carries debris, wood, metal, fuel, turning the surge into a moving field of impact. That's what everyone pictures right now. And the picture grows sharper as the minutes pass with no all clear. The earthquake's location offshore is what keeps the fear spiking. Offshore quakes have the perfect geometry for tsunami risk. A violent shift where land meets ocean, an upheaval that can shove the water column like a piston. And even if the sea surface looks calm near the shore, the wave energy can be traveling underneath like a hidden freight train. In monitoring rooms, they watch for the pulse on gauges. In coastal towns, they watch the horizon. And every second becomes heavier. The escalation begins to take a darker turn as officials consider what an offshore quake can trigger beyond the immediate wave threat. A powerful quake doesn't just shake one place. It can destabilize systems. It can damage undersea cables, disrupt communications, rattle fuel lines, crack roads, weaken slopes. In Alaska, where infrastructure can already be stretched thin by distance and weather, the margin for error is small. If power fails in a coastal town during a tsunami warning, sirens may not work. If cell towers go down, alerts may not reach pockets of people. If roads crack or bridges shift, evacuation routes can become traps. And this is the kind of cascade that terrifies emergency planners. The disaster within the disaster. Along the coast, some people report flickering lights. In some areas, the internet slows under the sudden surge of traffic. Every system becomes stressed. Networks, roads, human nerves. In a harbor office, someone tries to radio a vessel. No answer. They try again. Static. They look out toward the water and feel the helplessness of not knowing if that boat is safe, if it even gets the warning. Out on the water, fishermen and crews face a brutal calculation. If you're at sea when a tsunami is coming, sometimes the safest place is deeper water, away from the shore, away from the violent shallows where surges amplify. But getting there requires time. It requires clear communication. It requires the ability to move. And right now, the offshore quake has turned the entire marine environment into uncertainty. The human impact stories begin to stack fast because coastal danger turns ordinary people into survival characters without warning. A mother in a small coastal neighborhood hears the alert and runs to the nearest school because her first thought isn't herself, it's her child. The school is already in motion, staff moving kids, teachers counting heads with shaking hands. The mother arrives breathless and finds a crowd. People shout names. Someone says the buses are coming. Someone says the roads are jammed. The mother looks toward the ocean and feels like she is staring at a door that might open. A commuter on a coastal highway feels the quake as a strange sway under the tires. They pull over. They watch the sea for a second. Then the alert hits, and suddenly the commute is a race. The commuter turns the car around, joining a stream of vehicles, all moving the same direction, all fleeing the same invisible threat. In a nursing home near the water, staff move quickly but carefully, because panic can injure people as surely as a wave. They gather residents, wheelchairs rolling across floors that just shook. Someone drops a clipboard and doesn't pick it up. Someone prays out loud. Someone keeps asking the same thing. Are we okay? And nobody answers with confidence, because confidence is not available right now. Authorities intensify the messaging. Stay away from the coast. Do not return for belongings. Move to high ground immediately. The problem is time. Tsunami fear spikes because the clock is cruelly short. Depending on where the wave forms and how it travels, coastal communities can have minutes, not hours. That's why people are running now, not later. That's why sirens matter. That's why the offshore location of the quake makes the danger feel like it's already on its way. And in the middle of it all, the earth still feels unsettled. Aftershocks begin to ripple, smaller jolts that remind everyone the ground is not done talking. Each aftershock is like a fresh slap of fear because it keeps the event alive. It tells people the system is still moving, the fault is still adjusting, something is still breaking, even if you can't see it. Every aftershock sparks fresh confusion. People stop mid-evacuation and look around. Some scream, some laugh in disbelief, some go silent. Cars wobble slightly, objects in houses shift again, and the ocean, always the ocean, stays there, waiting. Infrastructure starts to show strain in subtle, unsettling ways. A cracked road here, a jammed intersection there, a broken water main reported by someone who doesn't know if it's real damage or just sloshing. Dispatchers log it all, overwhelmed. Emergency responders are now facing two fronts: earthquake impacts and tsunami preparation. They have to check on injuries from falls, from broken glass, from panic-driven accidents, while also pushing people away from the shore. They can't be everywhere at once, and Alaska's geography makes everywhere enormous. In some coastal communities, evacuation means climbing. People leave cars behind when traffic stalls and start moving on foot. Boots pound asphalt. Breath becomes visible in the air. The sound of sirens carries in strange ways over water and through cold. Some people look back. That's the most haunting part, the instinct to confirm what you're afraid of. They look back at the coast and see an ordinary line of water, maybe a few ripples, maybe a boat rocking gently. And that normality feels wrong, because if the danger is real, it can still be hidden. The warning signs and signals become the narrative people cling to. Someone says the sea level gauge just changed. Someone says they heard an official mention strong currents. Someone else says they saw the water pull back at the harbor mouth. Another person says a friend's cousin works at a station and says it's coming. Truth and rumor blur, because the human brain cannot sit inside uncertainty without trying to fill it with something. And the something it fills it with is often terror. As the minutes tick on, the worst-case scenarios begin to loom in the minds of everyone involved. If the tsunami arrives, it can hit harbors first, then sweep into low streets, then cut off evacuation routes behind people. If the wave is strong enough, it can rip fuel tanks, ignite fires, and turn coastal towns into places emergency crews cannot enter. If communications fail, some pockets of the coast may never get coordinated instructions. If the quake damages docks and ports, supply lines can be disrupted. If roads crack in remote sections, some towns may become isolated. And beyond that, the quake itself raises the specter of a larger sequence. Because powerful quakes offshore can sometimes be the opening move, not the finale. They can be the trigger that loosens other stressed segments beneath the region. Scientists don't say, done, not yet. They say monitoring, they say assessing. They say watching for further activity. And to the public, those words translate into one thing: we don't know if this is over. Human stories intensify as the evacuation spreads. A teenager runs uphill with no coat, phone clutched in a bare hand, eyes wide, breath ragged. They don't feel cold. They feel time. They keep looking at the phone screen like it's a lifeline. They can't reach a parent. The signal is busy. Calls don't connect. That failure, tiny and technical, becomes emotional catastrophe. An elderly man refuses to leave his home because he has lived through warnings before. He stands at his door and argues with a neighbor. The neighbor begs. The man says he's fine. The neighbor turns away in frustration and fear because they can't drag him, they can't force him, and the idea of leaving someone behind becomes its own wound. A dock worker tries to untie a vessel, thinking they can save it. Someone screams at them to get away. The worker hesitates because livelihoods are tied to boats, to gear, to months of work. But then the siren sound cuts through again, and the worker lets the rope go, running. That's what disaster does. It forces the choice between things and lives, and it does it fast. The system failures begin to stack more noticeably. On certain routes, traffic becomes gridlock. People abandon vehicles. That creates new blockages. Emergency vehicles struggle to get through. A single stalled truck becomes a wall. In some towns, power flickers again. Streetlights blink out, then back. The darkness makes the fear feel larger. People move in clusters, because being alone feels dangerous, even if the danger is the ocean. Communication networks strain under the load of mass texting, calling, video uploads. A warning system can be perfect, but if the last mile of communication fails, people lose precious seconds. And seconds are everything in a tsunami threat. The larger looming threat becomes not just the wave itself, but the chain reaction across the region. Coastal Alaska is a network of communities that rely on ports, roads, and communications that are vulnerable by design, because building stable, redundant infrastructure in extreme terrain is hard, expensive, and never complete. A wave doesn't have to kill to cripple. It can destroy docks and fishing fleets, disrupt fuel deliveries, contaminate water supplies, and leave towns stranded. Even the fear of a wave can cause damage. Car accidents during evacuation, injuries from falls, panic-triggered medical emergencies. Hospitals become busy with people who are hurt not by water, but by the urgency to escape water. Emergency managers understand that. They track every incoming report, trying to triage in real time. They have to make decisions with partial information, because that's how disasters work. And now, the ocean is the judge. On the coast, some people reach higher ground and stop. They turn around and stare down at their towns like they're looking at a photograph of a life that might be erased. They clutch children. They clutch each other. They try to be quiet, as if noise can summon the wave. The wind moves. The sea glints. The sky looks indifferent. But the threat does not need to look angry to be lethal. In harbors, the water begins to behave strangely in places. Subtle changes, odd currents, a sense of restlessness. People who stay too close feel it first, not as a wall of water, but as a wrongness. A pull, a surge, a shifting that makes ropes tighten and slacken. Some see it and run. Some film it. Some freeze. Officials push harder now, get away from the shoreline. And then, as the warning continues, the psychological pressure becomes unbearable. People are trapped in a state of sustained panic, waiting for an impact that may come any second. That waiting is its own disaster. It turns normal sounds into threats. A distant crash becomes the wave. A siren becomes it's here. A shout becomes someone's drowning. A rumble becomes another quake. Every sensation is amplified. Every moment feels loaded. In monitoring centers, scientists and technicians keep watching the data streams because the only way to know is to measure. They watch tide gauges, buoy readings, coastal sensors. They compare signals. They look for the unmistakable signature of a tsunami, sudden changes that move along the coast in a sequence. But nature does not always deliver a clean signature. Sometimes the wave is small, but dangerous. Sometimes it's delayed. Sometimes it arrives as a series of surges that look like chaotic tides until they slam into a harbor with violent force. That ambiguity terrifies everyone, because it means you can't relax. You can't interpret the ocean with casual eyes. Meanwhile, the Quake's offshore location continues to dominate the narrative. Offshore means water. Offshore means displacement. Offshore means the possibility of energy moving straight into the coast. And Alaska's coast has long memories. People remember stories of waves, of sudden destruction, of towns that change in minutes. Whether they've lived it or only heard it, the memory is enough to propel them upward, away from the waterline. The escalation toward worst-case scenario keeps climbing because the quake is not just a single event. It is a strike to a system already under stress. Winter conditions in parts of Alaska mean roads can be slick, visibility can be limited, temperatures can punish anyone forced to evacuate on foot. Now, the disaster isn't just the wave. It's exposure, it's hypothermia, it's people stranded on hillsides without coats, without supplies, without a clear timeline for when it's safe to return. Emergency shelters open in some areas. People crowd inside, wet-eyed, shaken. Some are crying, some are numb. Some stare at their phones, watching the same alert wording again and again as if repetition will turn fear into certainty. But certainty doesn't come, because the Earth is still unsettled. Aftershocks continue to remind everyone that the fault system is active, and every aftershock refreshes the tsunami fear, because people wonder, did that one shift the seabed more? Did that one create the wave after all? That's the nightmare scenario. An initial quake that destabilizes, followed by another movement that turns the ocean into a weapon. And so, the dread remains open. Infrastructure failures deepen in pockets. A few coastal roads are now clogged beyond usefulness. Some drivers run out of fuel in slow-moving lines. Others abandon cars in dangerous spots, creating obstacles for emergency response. Radio channels fill with overlapping voices. Dispatchers attempt to separate reports, injuries, structural damage, missing persons, tsunami sightings. But in the chaos, reports blur. Someone says, water is moving. Someone else says, it's just the tide. Another screams, it's coming! And then the line cuts. That line cut alone can shatter nerves. The larger looming threat expands beyond the immediate coastline. If a tsunami forms, it can travel. It can impact multiple communities. It can move along bays and inlets, focusing energy in certain locations, amplifying in narrow waterways where the water has nowhere to go but up and in. It can also disrupt shipping and maritime operations across a wider area, leaving vessels in confusion, ports shut down, commerce frozen. And the quake itself raises the possibility of underwater landslides, massive slumps of sediment triggered by shaking. Those can generate localized waves with little warning, striking certain stretches of coast harder than others. The seafloor, in this moment, is not stable. It is shaken, loosened, dangerous. People on high ground watch for the first visible sign. They search the water for an unnatural line, a change in color, a sudden surge. But the first sign of a tsunami is often not a wave crest. It's the water moving like it has been commanded. It's the harbor draining. It's the current twisting. It's the sea pulling back and then rushing forward with force. And that is why the fear spikes. Because the sea is not a single moving wall. It is a system that can turn violent in ways that don't look like movie waves until the damage is already underway. Human impact stories shift darker as the minutes go on. A family on foot slips on icy ground while climbing. Someone falls. People scramble to lift them, hands shaking. The fall is minor, but the moment is major, because it shows how fragile evacuation can be, how quickly survival turns into injury. A man tries to carry an elderly relative up a slope. He stops, panting. He looks back toward the town. He looks at the person in his arms. He keeps going because stopping feels like surrender. A group of workers at a coastal facility attempt to shut down equipment before leaving because leaving systems running can create fires or leaks if water hits. They move quickly, but every step is haunted by the thought, are we wasting time? Tsunami fear spikes because every action feels like a gamble, and the longer the warning persists, the more the public senses that something in the data is not reassuring enough to end it. Officials remain cautious because caution is the only currency in a moment like this. They keep people away from the shore. They keep roads moving where possible. They coordinate with local leaders. But the emergency response can be overwhelmed by geography alone. In some places, help is minutes away. In others, it's hours away. In others, it's inaccessible if roads fail. That is the terror of Alaska's scale. You can be in danger with no immediate rescue possible. And now the region is under a kind of invisible siege, by the ocean, by uncertainty, by the possibility of the next shock. The unsettling ending begins to form as the narrative pivots from event to unknown future. The quake hits offshore, the fear spikes, the people move, the agencies watch. But the question that becomes unbearable is not just, is a wave coming? It's, what else did that quake set in motion? Because the Earth rarely moves once and then politely stops. A powerful offshore quake can change stress along an entire zone. It can awaken segments that were quiet. It can trigger aftershocks that feel like warnings. It can alter coastal stability, making cliffs and slopes prone to collapse. It can also damage the unseen arteries of modern life. Undersea cables that carry communications, pipelines that move fuel, infrastructure that depends on fragile connections. And if those fail, Alaska's coast faces a second disaster: isolation. As the hours threaten to stretch, people remain displaced on high ground, staring down at their lives below. Some have no food, some have no warm clothes, some have kids shivering, shelters strain, emergency services triage. The coast is quiet in a way that feels wrong, like a theater holding its breath before a final act. Then another tremor, faint but real, rolls through in some areas, and the entire crowd reacts like a single organism. Heads snap up, eyes widen, someone screams, someone starts running again even though they're already on high ground. Because the body doesn't care about logic now, it cares about survival. Scientists continue to monitor because they are not just watching for one wave. They are watching for a pattern. They are watching to see if the sea level changes line up, if the pressure readings stabilize, if the system settles. But settle is not a promise. And across Alaska's coast, the fear remains raw because the ocean remains unreadable. The last images are the most chilling. Empty streets near the shoreline, doors left open, cars abandoned at strange angles, a harbor rocking gently under gray light, and beyond it all, offshore, the dark water that hides the fault line that just snapped. The quake is already in the past, but the consequences are still arriving. And right now, with tsunami fears spiking along the coast, the most terrifying truth is that nobody can see what's moving beneath that surface until it finally reaches the land. So the coast waits, frozen between shaking ground and approaching sea, while scientists keep staring at the screens, and families keep gripping each other on the hills, because the next signal could be the all clear. or the first confirmation that the ocean is no longer just water, but a force loading up for impact. And if the sea begins to surge in the next few minutes, how many people are still too close to the shoreline to escape?